Hello and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. Today, we have the great pleasure of having Erik Peterson with us. He's host of the Esoteric Journey show, or you would call it a show, a podcast? Uh,
Yeah, it's like a show or a podcast of sorts.
a salon,
Um,
maybe.
yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
it's different things.
That's awesome. I've seen a few of the videos, and we got in contact because I commented on some, and there's been a few. This is just for the audience to be kind of aware. There's been a few sort of synchronicities or coincidences or I don't know, connections between us, like and yeah. So for me, when things like that start to happen, I don't necessarily say, oh, this must mean X, Y, Z, whatever, but I do go like, okay, this means something. There is something here that the universe is pointing at me to investigate, to explore. I've had that with people like yourself, but also with events or with certain kinds of research or certain information that I've started investigating and going deep into, and that those things have helped me, have helped my life. And so I'm very, very friends with synchronicities, and I follow them when they come up. So without further ado, Erik, how are you? I hope you're doing great.
I'm good, Rafa, and I'm really happy to be here. Been looking forward to this, so this is exciting. And yeah, like you said, it's kind of we started out as just doing Thursday nights, and everyone that had the Zoom link was invited to come and just have a conversation about different esoteric topics. And we get into art and other things as well. We've had like some group art projects that we've worked on, and we try to use art as a means for doing alchemy on ourselves. And then I started doing my own videos and talking about things that were pertinent or interesting to me, like especially revolving synchronicities. And mentioning that, I was like, this past week has just had so many synchronicities for me. And at some point they pile up, right? And it's really difficult to try to make any sense of them because they keep coming so quickly. And I'm starting to learn to just follow them and just roll with them. And I mentioned something to you about when I saw your comment on one of my videos. It's like, well, this person doesn't look like somebody I know, and how do they even find my videos? And I had just recently done a show with a mutual friend of ours, Emily Moyer, and that hadn't even gotten posted yet. And so I just kept thinking, I'm like, how did he find my channel? That's odd. And I just had this weird sense that you were going to reach out to me. And so I've noticed this happens when I start paying attention to synchronicities. I've started to notice that I've developed this ability, not all the time, but sometimes I just get these senses about things that are going to happen, and they usually happen like and within a short period of time. So it's like a little bit of a clairvoyance comes into the picture, because if you really look at synchronicities, to me, they are reflections of myself, right? I am causing them to happen to lead me in a direction that I should be going. And it's not the universe per se telling me where to go. It's more of myself telling myself where to go. Like I'm having a conversation with myself, because a lot of times synchronicities are very personal and specific to you, and nobody else would really get. I mean, they can see that, yeah, it's interesting, it's odd, but it doesn't have any meaning to them. What makes something a synchronicity versus like a coincidence is the meaning that the person derives from it who's having that experience. And so I feel like it's myself, I don't know, projecting out things for me to look for, right? Um, you could call it the universe or God, however you choose to view these things. I definitely feel like synchronicities are a mystical thing. And, if you follow them, you will notice more strange and interesting things happen in your life.
Definitely. It's been like that for me. And how I reached your channel and your videos was, I'm not exactly 100% sure, but which sometimes ties into the synchronicities because they sort of lead you without you even knowing where you're going. But I remember listening to Emily with your friend and co-host Michael Watchstar. They recorded an episode together alongside with Nish. Both of them I didn't know about, but the episode was so interesting that I ended up contacting Nish, and she sent me another episode where she was talking with Michael and his ideas on time and symbols and I don't know, a very 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 wild and interesting podcast as well. And I think in that show he mentions the Esoteric Journey podcast. So I went looking, and then I found you, and I was like, "Is this it? This is another person." But then I started watching, and eventually I saw that you both do the thing together sometimes, and yeah, and it was so interesting, especially this recent thing that you started going down on the what was it? This the witches with Carlos Castaneda, yeah.
Oh yeah, the
On,
Castaneda thing.
yeah, that one was very good, and it really caught my attention. And I've been on another channel listening to some of his books and some chapters from his books, where he talks about dreaming and second attention and all that stuff. And it's pretty weird, but it's also super interesting. So I was happy to find something more about the kind of the history behind or surrounding him, but at the same time, I'd already heard that there was this kind of polemic around his character and his person. But I'm usually more like, I don't really care so much about the person rather than the message. I try to separate the message and the messenger, like with channelers or whatever. It can sound weird, but the person sharing the message or their personal story perhaps, but what about the message is many times my question. I try to see how the message resonates.
Well, so
You cut off for a moment the audio. You said
okay.
So.
Yeah, it looks like every once in a while my connection gets bad, so hopefully I don't break up too much. I was going to ask you, as a person who has read or listened to a lot of Castaneda's work, do you think that his message, like the overall information that he was trying to get across, would have been better received had he been like a guru or sort of a celebrity, such as the people of his day, like a Terence McKenna or there was so many people at that time, not so many, but there were people at that time who were involved in the psychedelics movement. Obviously, Timothy Leary, one of the biggest ones that comes to people's minds. And a lot of people were talking about similar things around that period of time in the 60s and 70s. And I thought it was interesting, the fact that he was exposed as a fraud, and yet his books have never gone out of print. They sell about, I don't know, 10,000 or so copies a year. I mean, or some figure like that. And they've never classified them as fiction. So I'm curious, do you think his message was better received because he went at it from this anthropological point of view? Or do you think the message, the core of what he was trying to impart to people, would have been better received had he not made up this Don Juan character and just wrote books?
Well, first I'm going to say that I'm by no stretch of the imagination am I an expert or anything like that on Castaneda, but I would the information that comes through his books and stuff resonates with me. It has a ring of truth, and I would say, on the one hand, we all get the the master or the teacher we need for whatever our egos are. And I mean, you show in your videos the women that followed him. They are kind of weird, kind of strange people, with all the respect in the world, but they are not just a regular Joe or something like that. They're special people. Most likely, we could even say they are kind of reincarnations that have been coming to the planet together in a certain way with him, and in playing different roles, perhaps. And at the same time, the thing about Don Juan, uh, that is for the audience, Don Juan would be the teacher that is talked about in those books. Maybe I mean, the information is so specific and has a ring of truth, which makes me feel like it does come from an authentic, let's say, source. And perhaps he had to hide the real identity of that source. And so he just went Don Juan because it's a very common name. It's like Mr. John. It's like anybody could be that guy. And I think, again, the whole context would probably of is it a fraud? Is it real? His personality is kind of he's not a very sociable person, or not a very public person, and the stories about him maybe are not very what we say. The stories about him are interesting, to put it in a simple way. So I think that all that controversy, in a way, is something that happens many times. For example, with Osho, the whole controversies that happen around certain characters, in a way, act like as a bubble, or as a curtain, or as a smoke screen to deter those people that cannot go through that first impression. You know what I mean? Like if this person's personality is shocking for you, you're not going to continue exploring, and that will be a kind of filter which will only allow to pass through those people for whom the message is, I think.
Well, I mean, two things occurred to me when I was looking at this person and all of the events surrounding him. And the first thing is, and this is applicable to anybody really, if you're trying to impart truth of any kind to a large group of people, or even to one individual, it's never really that well received. Truth is not something that people always want. Oh, I want the truth. Don't lie to me. I want the truth. But I found that when you actually tell people a truth, or a perceived truth, it is not something that is very easily received. It's a difficult thing to internalize and to process. And so you have to make it as palatable as you can for the audience to which you are directing it and that you want to receive it. So you have a guy like Carlos Castaneda, who he was nobody. He drove a cab, he worked at like a convenience store or something, and he was a nobody. So if he had written these books, nobody would know who he is. Nobody would buy them. Nobody would read them. Truth would just fall on deaf ears. They might even just think he was, interesting fictional writer. But the fact that he went to a prestigious and well-accredited university, and part of his writing was to obtain a PhD in a field of study like anthropology, well, then he could present the ideas that he wanted to present with an air of authority, right? And now he's reaching a broader audience. He's reaching academics, not just hippie burnouts who are doing drugs and taking wonderful trips, right? Nothing wrong with those people, but he wanted to reach a different audience that, the Timothy Learys and the Ken Keseys and the Jerry Garcias and all those people, they weren't reaching a certain demographic of people, right? Their message was, at least that's the perception I've got from looking at that time period, is that, you know, there was a subculture at the time, and it was mostly younger people who were receiving these messages and joining up with these groups or cults or whatever. And you know, Castaneda went a different route, and he got more legitimacy by attaching UCLA and anthropologist PhD to his work, and it reached a broader audience. And so I think he achieved a goal. Whether or not Don Juan is a real person doesn't really matter. Like what you're saying is that, you know, that information resonates with a lot of people. There's a ring of truth to it. And so I think he presented it in a way that is just more palatable for people to internalize those truths. Because when you're talking about a truth that fundamentally changes the way you view reality, those are the hardest truths to get people to really look at. You know, it's easy to say, oh, politicians are lying to you, or, you know, this thing isn't good for you, even though they say it is. That's hard enough. But to get people to say, oh, yeah, this isn't what reality is really like, it's like this. And they're like, no, I can't accept that. And so, you know, that's just something that occurred to me, was that, you know, you have to make things palatable to your audience. And if you really want to have an impact, if your goal is to just impart truth, you can go out and say what you want to say. But if you don't say it in a way that people can really understand it and process it, then your message is just going to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, I think so too. And the stuff he talks about, like the perspective, more than what he talks about, is the perspective that I've in the very little that I know about his work, the perspectives of like this in particular the dream worlds and the dream scouts, and I don't know, different kinds of characters and or entities or energies that can appear in one's dreams, and the way one interacts with them, and also how Don Juan describes those entities as kind of tricksters that want to actually kind of pull you into their world, not necessarily for your own good, but for their for an opportunity to live off of your energy or something like that. I don't know. It's very interesting. And how he uses different exercises to train his dreaming or his second attention to, because I mean, for me, dreams, I'm not a kind of person that when I'm in a dream, I'm super lucid at all. I many times I don't remember my dreams, but when I do remember them, they are usually very significant. And when I'm in the dream, many times it's like the dream is so intense and so, not intense necessarily, but so real that
Vivid.
so vivid, yeah, that my attention is like completely drawn by the drama of whatever is happening, and I'm seldom can I be like, oh, I'm dreaming, I'm going to flip the script here, or I'm more like, wow, okay, so I'm on a ride, I'm like on a, what you call this, a slide, you know, I'm going down a slide and let's see what happens. But he talks about being able to become lucid and control the dream, and actually like focus on certain details, that then those details, it's like he goes into the details and pops out into another world, and it's like he goes very deep with this stuff. So it's like something that is so specific that it kind of rings like somebody that has experience with this. At the very least, by himself, he got experience with the dream, but most likely he was taught about it. And actually, before we started recording, we were talking about ancient history and alternative history. I think he mentions the sorcerers of I don't know the exact word he uses, but like ancient sorcerers who fell into the trap by I think by the dream beings or something like that. And I think I can associate those sorcerers he's talking about, meaning perhaps sorcerers or priests from what we would call today Atlantis, perhaps. And I think that connects to what we were speaking before we started recording.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you bring up dreams too, because I was just talking about this the other night. You know, everybody goes into another dimension every single night. When you close your eyes and you go to sleep and you dream, you're in another dimension. You know, you're in what we like to call the dream world, but it's no less real than this world, right? Especially when we're there, because something I've noticed about dreams, and I'm like you, I don't really lucid dream. I would love to practice some lucid dreaming techniques. I know, you know, my co-host Michael Wachter, he does some lucid dreaming, and Nish, who you mentioned, probably is very skilled at lucid dreaming. So I don't really know a lot about lucid dreaming, but as far as, you know, the dream world goes, things that I've noticed are when you go into a dream, you're not really conscious of the fact that you're going into a dream. You're just sort of, it's like you go through a portal and you're just there, and nothing about the dream seems odd. The minute you pop in, it's like you already know what's going on. Nothing seems odd, even though like the laws of physics are being violated, and you know, there's things that just can't. There's people there that either you don't even know or you haven't seen, or they could even be people that are dead. I mean, I've seen my dead mother in dreams that I've had and communicated with her. Was that really her? Was I just projecting what I thought, you know, she would be like? You know, who knows? But there's no sense of, oh wow, what is this place? What am I doing here? This is so strange. It's like you've always been there, and you just sort of slide into this other life that you live when you're not awake here. And when you wake up, most of the time you don't remember anything, or what you do remember fades so quickly that you just have like a vague notion of it. And so, you know, traveling to other dimensions, or other worlds, whether it be a dream world or, you know, you physically leave this reality in some way, I would imagine that there's probably an aspect of that, right? And we talk about reincarnation. Well, what is that? That's just going into another reality, another body, and not remembering anything that happened prior to that. And that's what dreaming is like. You're going into another world.
I think that's interesting that maybe I have the idea wrong, but it's interesting how in Castaneda's work, that idea of the second attention connected with the way you just described it. It's like, it's so much another kind of attention that you don't even remember this first attention, let's say, which is this one we're having right now in our waking life. But you go in there and totally I'm not so good at lucid dreaming, but I don't generally like have memories when I'm in a dream. I don't usually question, oh, but what was my life yesterday, let's say, for the character in the dream.
Or did I forget to turn the stove off? I should probably leave the stream and go do that.
Totally. Yeah, you're just there.
Yeah, all perception of the waking world is just gone. And there's not even a thought about what's going on in the waking world while you're in the dream world. And, you know, there's a lot of parallels, I think, between that and this idea of reincarnation, or the memory wipe. And maybe lucid dreaming is a good example of the ability to go into the dream world with full awareness, full memory. So you do bring that first attention in to that second attention. And so you're holding two worlds in your consciousness at the same time, right? So you're bringing everything from the waking world into the dream world. And then when you leave the dream world, you're paying more attention to what's happening there. And you're bringing that full memory of that experience back into the waking world. And see, this, I think, in a sense, you could look at, say, there's probably people in this reality that have left this cycle of reincarnation and the going through the sea of forgetfulness, right? And have that full memory of all lives and what they are and what this place is, and choose to come back having that full memory and that full awareness of what they are and where they are with a purpose. And to them, you know, it really is a game. And I don't think it's necessarily that they have like ill intent, right? Or they may not even have good intent. There is an intent of sorts, right? And they want to accomplish something by coming back into this place. But there's a lot of parallels between that idea and just dreaming and lucid dreaming.
And you remind me of the idea of the bodhisattvas in Buddhism. So like choosing to not exit the wheel of reincarnation until, I think there's this poetic way, until the last blade of grass has been freed or something of the sort. You reminded me of something. Let me see if I can bring it back. It just escaped my mind. But you were saying about this connection with reincarnation and people being able to go out. So I think like outside of, I mean, this is completely hypothetical on my part, but outside of the of this, or to put it another way, this idea of the second attention in dreams and being able to take the waking attention there as well and being lucid. This is an interesting topic. I think one of the most powerful things in our waking life is this ability to observe ourselves, to observe our thoughts, to be the witness. So that for me is another way of what you were saying. So like, instead of only being lucid in the dream, let's start being lucid in the waking life as well. So being not just conscious and aware of the humanity of our experience, but also of this awareness of being present. It's hard to put into words, but it's the most classical and the most common, like, pointing in most spirituality. I think this for example, in Hinduism they talk about Atman. So it's, in a way, you could say Atman would be kind of your oversoul or your higher self or something of the sort. And when you're here on earth, you're Erik, but at the same time you're this oversoul who is looking at Erik. So like first person and third person, in a way, like games, right? And being able to bring that back, or more to keep that awareness alive and present in our waking life, that is extremely important and extremely liberating and powerful, because you get another sense of why you're here. So you were also, maybe this was before we started recording as well, mentioning how we can have a sense of direction, or of, no, you were just talking about this, of like a mission, right? An intention, I think is the word you used. Having this intention is connected to something that's very popular nowadays, of finding your purpose and the reason why you're here and blah, blah, blah. It's that your higher self knows why you're here, because you could say that your higher self is the one that decided to come here. So the higher self said, okay, I'm gonna go there so I can do X or be X. The bodhisattva would be, okay, I'm gonna go back so I can help others continue to liberate themselves. But then you come here and you forgot, what am I doing here? You go through all the process. But at some point, through maybe synchronicities and certain connections with people and events, you start sort of remembering, but also through paying attention with this, if this is the first awareness, the dream is the second. We could call this zero awareness, perhaps, before the one. Being aware of your heart, which sounds cliche, but like, oh, how does this feel to me? And those kind of things can start guiding you to your purpose. and and reaching and going after your purpose, or looking into that, can help you understand why your higher self decided to come here. Sorry for the long rant.
No, no. Yeah, and I I would agree. I think that the more you begin to eliminate the falsehoods from your paradigm of how you see the world, the more you have to then fill in those gaps. And you really can't trust what you've been told, what you've been taught. And so the only thing that you can really rely on is your own experience. And that's going to come from inside of yourself. And it's really going to rely more about intuition and feeling, like you're talking about with the heart. Does this feel right? Does this feel righteous? Or does this feel wrong? Right? If I steal this, or if I tell this person a lie, is that bad? Is that evil? Or, will it actually spare them some hurt and some pain? Like you have to make these calculations now. And, the things that you're doing and the things that you're looking at, you have to ask yourself and say, does this feel like the right place to put my attention? Or does it feel like something that's going to suck my attention away from something else that's more productive? And you start to rely more on yourself and your heart and your awareness of yourself. And I think your purpose just starts to unfold itself to you. You just start to see that path unfold in front as you begin to walk. The path just moves up and you just follow it where it goes. Definitely from my own experience, service to others feels good. Giving to people, especially even anonymously, feels really good, especially when I don't have much to give. Feels even better. Like it's weird, but the less I have to give, if I give that away, it feels better than if I had an abundance and just gave a little bit. Right. So I don't really know, taking from other people never feels good, even if you really need something and they're being gracious enough to offer it to you. It still is not the greatest feeling in the world to have to take something from somebody else. Right. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, where they feel this obligation now to quickly pay it back, or how can I make it up to you? Like I have to make this equation balance, right? This is out of balance now, and I have to put things right. But giving never feels that way. It's like, whoa, you better pay me back now and balance out the equation. No one's ever really thinking that, unless, of course, they're not really operating from that place where they're trying to figure out what feels right and what doesn't. And I had a bunch of other thoughts while you were talking too. But go ahead with that, because I gotta think again.
Yeah, maybe about this idea of bringing the consciousness, this thing I just made up the name, the zero attention, bringing it into the game. It's a very powerful tool, and actually, there's this book I'm going to start reading in the channel soon. It's called the Buddhist Yoga of Dream and Sleep, something like that is the title. It's amazing. I actually did a few of the practices. I didn't get deep into dream practices, but there was this practice to cultivate your attention and the focus, which is very great. And the idea behind the book is that what you do is you practice being aware of the dream, so becoming lucid in a way in your dream. You practice that in order to bring that ability back into waking life, and being lucid in waking life as well. Because how people are always throwing numbers or percentages of the subconscious. Your subconscious programming is running the game 95% of the time, or stuff like that. So if we are 95% of the time not lucid in waking life, imagine if we could bring, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, even 90 or whatever plus percent of awareness back into the waking life. Imagine all the the expansion one could experience in one's life,
Well,
and also, sorry, all the service that one could do for others who are on their own process of bringing more awareness to waking life.
absolutely. And it's such a good point that you bring up. We're talking about awareness and attention, and being lucid in the dream state, but we never really think about being fully lucid in the waking world. And yet many people can look out and see that there are people walking around that just do not seem to be fully lucid, right? So that's a really good point. It's not just about trying to maintain awareness and attention within the dream world, but in the waking world as well, because a lot of times we're on autopilot. I know I've walked into rooms and like, why did I come in here? What am I thinking? What was I going to say? My mind sometimes tends to drift into somewhere else, and people will be talking to me, and then or I'll be reading something, but my mind is somewhere else, and I'm reading words, and then I have no idea what I just read or listened to, and I'll have to go back, and because somebody will say one thing, and then immediately my brain is thinking all of these other thoughts. But if I'm not present and aware of what's being said. And I remembered, so that was we were talking about, being lucid in the dream world and in the waking world. And Carlos Castaneda, I know I mentioned there was this connection to the show, The OA, that's on Netflix. And one of the guys that's on that show that plays the doctor, Hap, Jason Isaacs is the actor's name. He was in a show. This was probably by 2010, 2011, maybe. I don't remember the name of the show, but it only ran for one season. But he was a detective, a police detective. And when he would go to sleep, he would wake up in another version of reality. He was still himself. He was a police detective, but when he was awake, right, his I believe his wife had died, and his child was alive. And then when he would go to sleep, he'd wake up in a reality where his child was dead, but his wife was alive. And he was working a case in each reality that seemed to bleed over into each other, right? And he was trying to figure out, so he was never actually sleeping. He was just having these experiences, but he could remember, at some point he had to wear a bracelet on his wrist to tell him which reality he was in, because it started to bleed together, and he started to forget which one was which. And so I just thought that was interesting that this guy, Jason Isaacs, he's been in some other interesting shows as well. And he'd be somebody that I've been wanting to look into more. But, just that idea that when we go to sleep, we're not really just sleeping. I don't think the body rests and repairs, but the consciousness, it goes somewhere. It doesn't just take a nap, right? The consciousness doesn't stop. It never ceases. It's always having an experience, whether that be in this reality or some other reality. So I definitely think lucid dreaming is a good thing to try to practice and cultivate, but also, meditation and breath work are ways that can help you with that, but also with the attention in the waking world as well, as you're talking about.
Yeah, because it would be important to practice that if you're going to bring it back. Like I remember McKenna saying, okay, so you have this psychedelic trip and you get all this information and you get solutions to save the world and solutions about your own life, etc. But then you come here, and what do you bring? Actually, do you bring back so that you can take action on whatever the mind expanding information that you received.
Yeah, I mean, Jung's conception of, dreams being like the collective unconscious, right? So this would be the collective conscious. The waking world is the collective conscious, and the dream world is the collective unconscious. So you really are just going into another dimension of reality where everyone exists there, right? It's a space, I guess, if we want to look at it in that sense, and everyone's there. It's not just unique to your consciousness, even though the argument could be made that it's always just your consciousness and everyone else is sort of created by your consciousness in order to interact with. But that aside, looking at the dream world as really no different than the waking world, and that Jung talks about the symbolism, these archetypes. And so when you're dreaming, a lot of times the dreams that you remember the most, that are most vivid to you, are usually experiences that are trying to tell you or inform you about something in the waking world that needs to be resolved. Other times, I think the forgetfulness of the dream is typically because nothing really important occurred. Like in our daily lives, there's plenty of days where nothing really important occurs. And if you ask me, how was last Wednesday or how was last Monday? I don't know. Nothing of note happened, right? But when something important happens, that day and that event stick in your mind. And so same in the dream world. You're going to have plenty of time in the dream world where nothing really important happens, nothing that you need to really resolve. And so this is just my theory that the dreams that are most vivid that we remember, and this is not while lucid dreaming, just your natural dream state, that those are things that you need to deal with in the waking reality. And it's like an information download, and you have to decrypt it, right? Because it's all in symbolism. And it's not like some guy just came up and said, hey, when you wake up, you're going to need to do this, right? And it's just more cryptic. But, I think it's more fun that way. Life is more interesting when there's mystery involved and you have to solve puzzles and uncover things for yourself. If everyone just told you everything, the totality of the greater reality, right? I mean, where's the fun in that?
Yeah, that would be game over. And I think it was you. Yeah, you just mentioned this. How I think it was in one of those episodes of yours that I watched. When somebody mentions something that is obvious, but they put it in the right words, that something in particular gets through. You just mentioned this idea of when you go to sleep. I mean, it's only the body that goes to sleep. It's like actually your consciousness is never asleep. That was like very, very enlightening for me when I heard you say that. I believe it was you. I'm correct, right?
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. So we are on archetypes and dreams. Yeah, and bringing all of our all those things that we don't want to confront, that we put under the carpet, we sweep under the carpet, we go to sleep, and there they are in symbolic ways, like you said. So kind of like a puzzle that you see that, or you get information from some characters in your dreams, and then you wake up and, well, okay, so now what are you gonna do with whatever happened? Like last night, I mean, I still haven't had time to decipher or decode this dream, but last night in particular, I do remember my dream. I don't remember it completely, but the part that I remember is probably what I needed to remember. So I went in the dream to actually one of my previous guests. I went to his house. He's more like a poet. I went to his house, and he cut my hair with the same kind of scissor that I use here in my house all the time. So it was a very symbolic type of scissor, which is not a haircut kind of scissor. So he would cut my hair, and he actually he had a cool technique. I was sitting on the chair, and he would rock the chair back and forth, and he would like go super fast, cutting my hair, very, very crazy. And that was the dream. I don't really know right now, haven't gone into analyzing it yet, but there's likely something there for me that for some reason it came up.
So the scissors were not your typical hair cutting scissors.
Yeah.
I mean, what type of scissors were these? Like gardening shears? Or?
No, just paper cutting scissors, like small, okay, like this size. They are very, very common. They are the black handle with a red spot, and then the metal knife or scissor.
And this was the person that was cutting your hair was somebody that you know.
Yeah, he's been on the show.
Does he actually cut hair?
I don't think so. And actually, when I went to his house, I passed along like an artist bench or something where he was making a drawing or something like that, and it was completed in pencil, and he was starting. You could see that he had already started doing the ink, but it was unfinished in the ink. And that was also very symbolic to me of how many times I'm trying to get things perfect on the first try. You know, I'm kind of putting too much pressure on myself to do it the best and on the first try. But like seeing that piece of art midway, you know, showed me, oh yeah, it's very very rough in pencil, but then the pen on top of it was very, very more like perfect or very beautiful and elegant. So that moment I had this like this clarity of, oh wow, yeah, so I don't necessarily always have to put this pressure on myself to do things perfect on the first try. I mean, it's nonsense to put that pressure on oneself.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, and by no means am I like an expert dream interpreter. So, you know, just take this for what it's worth. But, you know, the idea of hair, especially if you look at like the way the Bible talks about hair, you got Samson, who had these locks of hair, and this is where he derived his power from, because once his hair was cut, he no longer had this, you know, ability. Well, he had to some degree, right? He was able to push the pillars down, but for the most part, his power was drained when they cut his hair. And, you know, Samson was like a Nazarene, just like, you know, Jesus. They take like a period of time where they don't drink wine and they don't cut their hair, and there's the other things that they do, right? But the not cutting the hair thing is very important. There's the idea that the hair for women is like a covering, right? To hide you from other spiritual entities. But however you view hair has always seemed to be very important, even to most cultures. The way you wear your hair, the way women and men differ in how they wear their hair, but hair is important, right? And so there's this idea of hair being associated with one's virility and masculinity or power in a sense. And so it's interesting that in your dream, this person that you know, who's also happens to be an artist that I'm assuming that you admire and look up to as a human being, is the person that is symbolically, you know, cutting your hair, which is also very long, which takes a lot of patience and a lot of time to sit with that, right? as somebody who's had short hair most of my life and is now just letting it grow, because as you can see, it's just at that state where it's just not really all that long, but I'm getting there. And it takes some patience on my part to just let it go. And so, what you're talking about with not having to get everything perfect on the first try, that takes patience to deal with, right? And I don't know, maybe there's something in your life that you're not being patient with. And this cutting of the hair is telling you, like, you need to be patient. You need to just step back and let things unfold, and don't try to press things so hard to form them the way that you want them. Because sometimes when you have your will, and then there's things that if you're just doing your will, right, then there's this greater will at play that involved with synchronicities that you may just ignore or dismiss, and you're going to miss maybe a better opportunity. I don't know. That's just kind of the thoughts that I'm having. I'm looking at it symbolically, like, what is hair, and what's that really trying to tell you?
Yeah, thank you for that interpretation. I think he was very skilled at the cutting of the hair. I remember he would go like super fast, cutting my hair and rocking the chair back and forth so that it had like a not what's the name, like kind of rugged, I think is the word. So more wild perhaps.
I think clearly in the dream, he had some barber skills.
Yeah.
Right. He was very skilled. Developing a skill like that takes patience and time.
Yeah.
Right. Again, back to this idea that maybe you're trying to make something perfect, but you're being impatient with it, and you're not willing to invest the time that you need to invest in order to acquire that level of expertise and perfection, right?
Yeah.
Like the artist it's not just you throw something up there and it's the masterpiece the first time around. You don't produce something the first time out and it's your magnum opus, right? Everything takes time, and with that is required great patience. I don't know, just my 2 cents really on the dream. But
and nowadays, two things. The mainstream, let's say, kind of pushes this thing of doing it perfect on the first try, because you look at whatever in social media or whatever, any other place, and you aren't generally shown the process of things. You just get like the final photo or the final image and the final whatever, and it's done, and that's what we receive. But indeed, from like, I'm a musician as well, and I've made some songs or some sounds and music that I can totally see the process of my maturing in my expression of that art, and I could totally see, like, there is this kind of pressure that creates anxiety, I believe, in myself perhaps, but I think in general with people, that we need to be perfect, that we need to be picture ready all the time, and those ideas of people like doing yoga with like the perfect bodies and doing the perfect postures, or they look like models, and it's like it's celebrated to be that way, which isn't entirely natural, because it's also natural to have a process of development before you reach something like that. And last night we were watching Lord of the Rings, and we had the thought, wow, how weird is it that having long hair and beard and being kind of scruffy has been like the norm forever for men, and nowadays it's kind of looked at. I mean, it's coming back. Long hair is coming back, but it's kind of looked at like, oh, you're that's not so nice that your hair is long and your beard, you're like, you should be like a baby with no facial hair and very short hair. You know, those kind of weird ways, weird values that are promoted in our world. I don't know. I don't mean to get like dark or
Well,
whatever, but yeah.
So just recently I had this idea, I guess, about culture. And a lot of people think that culture just is something that happens organically. But if you really look at culture, most culture doesn't happen organically. Most culture is given to you. And if you look at what culture really is, it's like a frequency. And there's this broadcasted frequency, whether it be fashion or music or even deeper, like value systems, right? Like what's acceptable and what's not acceptable within the culture that you live in. And you can see many different cultures have different value systems, and a lot of that's tied up in their religious or cosmological belief systems, which, that's debatable whether or not they developed that themselves. But when you really look at it, it's a frequency, right? And people either are receiving that frequency and resonating, bringing themselves into harmonious resonance with that frequency by imitating the fashion style of the larger group, right? And so you would imagine that, well, like with a radio station, what station usually gets the most listeners is the one with the not necessarily the greatest signal output, right? Because in the FM band, right, you have all of these different stations. Some of them don't have quite the range as others, but you always have like a station that's widely popular with, the people that live within that band or range, right? And culture is like the same thing. It's a broadcasted signal, and it's not going to appeal to every single person within that range. But within that range, there's several or, however many bands that you can tune into and say, I don't really like what everyone else is doing. Let me see what else is on, right? And then you just tune a little bit and like, oh, here's a group of people that are doing things a little bit differently. I'm going to tune into this frequency, right? And so all you're really doing is just bringing yourself into resonance with a frequency by mimicking that frequency and then rebroadcasting it, right? So the more people that that listen to, say, rap music or, want to wear certain type of clothing, right? That's going to have a broader appeal because it's being rebroadcast, right? And it can stretch the width or the distance, right? That like, look at the United States. They've imported their culture all over the world, right? That frequency, that broadcast has just hit all of these towers, and it's now just broadcast all over the world. But at one point in time, it only was within the confines of its geographical area. So to me, in my mind, that all of that is just it's different frequencies. And where those frequencies come from, I mean, somebody's generating it, right? Somebody's saying, what's the new, like if you look at fashion, for instance, that's always determined by a very small group of people. What music is going to be popular is determined by a very small group of people. And then you start to look at that small group of people and you realize that, it's not a bunch of different small groups of people. It's like small groups of people that all know each other. And so, culture seems to be created by these groups, and they're setting certain frequencies for, apparently a specific purpose. And what that purpose is, I really can't say, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
In many times, I think they don't even know themselves what that purpose is. Some people might, for example, if I was to make a song and put it out, I might just do it out of wanting to share something beautiful and that it have a positive impact on other people. But others might want to put out a particular kind of message um, that is more specific, aligned with a certain mindset, or with certain ways of looking at the world. It's always been interesting for me. Like I don't generally write lyrics. I'm more like just a sound, and the sound feels more free, or more um, like my own point of view is not so much attached to that as perhaps it would be if I was to write a lyric. Not saying that all lyrics are attached to the person's point of view. There of course could be lyrics that come from somewhere else, and as I was just saying, some people put out culture without maybe even knowing what the intention behind is. And yeah, it can go both ways. I think some people could have more perhaps controlling interests, or more intentions of control, and others might do it in on the contrary, with intentions of helping people get free. Culture is a very interesting topic, a very large thing, because it's very real for all of us. I mean, you just said it. For example, the culture from the U.S. I mean, in the opposite hemisphere, very far away from the U.S., and you probably can name any event, or any, perhaps not any celebrity, because I try. It's not that I try not to follow. I just don't follow very much that. But you probably name 10 famous people from the US, and I can perhaps even know part of their history, or of their lives, without even having met them. And whereas perhaps for you is, oh yeah, this famous person lived in the same city as me, and for me, they are more like kind of the idea of the gods and the archetypes. They are more like symbols sometimes. Something that in your eyes could be real flesh and blood people. For somebody outside of the US, they are more like symbols and ideas, and role models, perhaps.
I just got this book called The Time Rivers by Goro Adachi.
I wanna get it too.
I mean, I've just read the first chapter, and I'm very intrigued by it. But he says something in there about mythology, and looking at mythology, and I don't have the book in front of me, but it's something to the effect of that, myths are really just like initiating people into the mysteries of reality. And it's, I just did a video recently where I talk about, the truth movement, and how it's essentially the same thing. And so after I made that video, I'm reading this quote, and I'm like, that's exactly what I was just talking about. It's kind of like this idea that, myths are designed to impart greater truths to those who seek them out, right? For many, it will just be a collection of impossible stories that don't really make a whole lot of sense, and don't really have very good moral, like a moral to it, or, the characters aren't very virtuous or anything. So a lot of people dismiss it as myth. It's just a story. And on a level, it is just a story. But there is like deeper truths within them. And so for those who want to go deeper, who aren't satisfied with the surface level explanation, they keep digging and digging and digging. And that's kind of like the truth movement is like that, right? There's so many rabbit holes and traps to keep you in just at that neophyte initiate level. But like with any secret group that claims to have secret knowledge, right? They keep that knowledge occulted and hidden for a reason, not because they're nefarious or evil, simply because they're not going to give that kind of information out. It's like, don't cast your pearls before swine. you're not going to tell somebody something that's going to be very difficult to swallow anyway, and that you're really going to have to work up to accepting in the first place. And so you run this gauntlet that we run in the truth movement, which, I mean, I don't even know if I'm part of that anymore, because I just got so far away from those kind of things. But I likened it to a funnel where you come in and it's just this wide open area, right? It's that wide path. And then you have at the bottom of the funnel, the narrow path. And very few get through there because so many people get stuck and they go down these different rabbit holes and they become experts on one thing, and they never move past it. So mythology seems to be, and somebody asked me too, like, well, how did that work before the internet? And I was thinking about that, like, that's such a good question. I mean, they posited that universities probably serve that function, as they probably still do. But the myths themselves and these secret societies have been around for as long as we can trace them back, ancient Egypt. So I think there have always been these groups, and I think culture plays into that, because if you look at what culture really does, culture is something that shapes your worldview, right? And what you really want to do is be able to look at culture objectively and say, like, I was raised in the Midwest of the United States, and I was raised in a home that was predominantly Christian. And within Christianity, there's many, many different denominations and viewpoints, right? But, if you really boil it down, everybody says I believe in this one God, and it's this God of the Bible, and the Bible is, the truth, and yada, yada, yada. And there's a culture that goes along with that, right? There's a way you carry yourself. There's things you don't do because they're deemed sinful or bad. So you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't do drugs, you don't have sex before marriage. Like, so the culture controls your behavior, and it will also control how you see the world. In Christianity, they say, well, you can't look at these certain things because they're evil and they're from Satan, right? And so if you go and you look into those things, then you run the risk of being possessed by demons. And, it's just like every culture has that built into them, where it's like this protective firewall. It's like, don't look over here, don't do it, right? But what is it that kids always do when you tell them not to do something, right? When you make something a mystery to them, when you withhold something, they want it all the more. And so I wonder, are cultures really just designed and set up to force us or to spark us to become intrigued and really look deeper, instead of just accepting the values and the culture that everyone else seems to be just going along with, right? And so in a way, they're designed to weed out, separate the wheat and the tares, the sheep and the goats, whatever analogy you want to use. There's people who within any given culture and in society at any time period, there are those people that are just always going to question everything that they're told and given and search for answers. And then there are those people that just won't do that.
Yeah, are taboos meant to keep us away from something or to look deeper into them? Really, yeah. And this, I think, ties into the topic at the start of Carlos Castaneda, and that idea of a kind of firewall. You use the word firewall right now, for those who will, you know what I mean? Like this aspect or this outer appearance of that group, for example, that would keep people away from investigating it, because it's, I got a little bug here, that because it would be so strange for some people, that those are the kind of people that culture doesn't really want to be infiltrated by, or they don't want certain people to know about their worldview, because those kinds of people wouldn't understand it and would modify the meaning of the thing. And it also, all that you were speaking reminds me of this idea that if somebody doesn't ask, then there is no, one shouldn't be giving information if the other person isn't asking. Like when you ask the question, it's kind of, okay, that shows that you're ready for the answer, or for some version of the answer at least.
Right. It's a method that, you want to make it just scary enough that people who have, like too much fear, they're operating at a frequency of fear that they'll just say, I'm not even going to go there. And you don't want those people going there, because they're not going to be able to handle the information or whatever the trials that you have to go through, right? Because it's not just about like, here's a book of all the secrets, here you go, right? It's not like that. It's when you start looking into like alchemy and things like that, there's a lot of things that occur within the self. And in order to really go into yourself and do the kind of work that you have to do to move on, to be able to handle the next thing, it takes a certain type of person, or a person that's reached a certain place in their life where they don't have that level of fear. And so they're able
you must not be afraid of this firewall.
Right, exactly. It's a firewall. We can get over that thing. Well, it's no big deal. It's
kind of like roller coasters. You must be this high to ride.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, it's like a degreed system. No matter where you enter into this, I've started to look at life as a game, right? Like an ARG. And not necessarily like a video game, but more like an alternate reality game. Because in an alternate reality game, you have this entrance point into the game. So whether it be a flyer or an advertisement or whatever it is, there's always something that pulls you in, and you decide to become an initiate, right? You have no idea what's ahead of you on this game or this journey, but it sounds exciting and it sounds intriguing. And so, they're looking for a certain type of person, and they want you to come in. But even those people that become initiates, they're just neophytes. They don't know anything, and they could toil and spend the rest of their life, at that level and never really go beyond that. Right. And so the further you go, right, the less people are actually going to be on that journey with you, until probably at some point it's just you, right? Because ultimately, I think that's how it's always been. It's just you, the individual. There's nobody that's going to like jump into another reality with you. It's just going to be you. And so it's a solitary journey, right? And it's not for everyone. A lot of people, I don't think, are ready for that kind of thing at the place where they're at. If we look at reincarnation as like you're coming back over and over and over again, and you're wiping your memory, but at the same time, somewhere in that unconscious is stored all of the necessary things, right? And you as a person are still continuing to grow throughout these lifetimes. It's not like you just start from scratch every single time and you have to get all the way to the end, or you got to go right back to the beginning. Because as with a game, right, you make a certain amount of progress and you save it, and then you start over again at that point. So I believe that there is an element of that to it. But it's not for everybody at every point in time, right? So yeah, the firewall is there, the fear is there to keep the people away that aren't ready for it. It's not because it's evil or it's dark or whatever, right? It gives that appearance, but only those who can really see past that, those are the people that they're really looking for. At least that's just my take on it. I'm not saying that that's how things are.
No, it's a very valid point of view. I resonate with the general idea very much. So, Erik Peterson, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. Unfortunately, I'm kind of tight on time today. I would love to continue this for a couple more hours. I'm sure we could. And please let's do it again very soon, whenever you can. And also, please let people know where they can find you and your Esoteric Journey show.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to do this again. And I really appreciate you having me on here. This was such a great conversation. And you're right, I could just keep talking to you for hours, but I know that you've got things to do, and I wish you all the best on your travels. If you want to find me, I am Esoteric Journey on YouTube, or you can also find me Esoteric Journey Facebook group. And if you want to join that group, I post some other stuff there, and I like to get people involved in the Thursday night shows a little bit more. So, I post the link for the Zoom for Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time up on my YouTube channel in the About page or in the image header. There's a quick link there. So if you want to just jump in with us and join whatever we're talking about, I'd love to have anybody that wants to do that.
That's a very cool idea to have people join and do something together. That's really, really beautiful, generating community and having a space where all the loonies can get together and talk about all this crazy stuff, which is so beautiful and important for our development, especially since we are now in this sci-fi world, or these mystic times, or these crazy new times that we're living through. So really, Erik, I appreciate it so much that you've been here, and I thank everybody there for watching. Please, all the share, like, comment, subscribe, all the things so much, and please do visit Erik's show and maybe pop up in one of those Thursday night Zoom calls. So I'll be seeing you very soon, and thank you, Erik. Bye bye. Namaste.
Bye, everybody.